Catherine J. Sepich, known to everyone as Katie, had grown up in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and was the oldest of 3 siblings. She graduated with a business degree from the New Mexico State University, was just about to start grad school to get her MBA. Her family said she was an outspoken, vivacious, intelligent 22-year-old, a natural leader and someone that knew exactly what she wanted and was always going to get it. Katie's dad, Dave, said she was quite something. She was a ball of fire from day one. She was going 90 miles per hour her whole life. From the youngest age, she was loud and rambunctious, often putting on little shows for her family or getting stuck into a sports game. Sassy with a quick sense of humor, and her friend Amy recalled, "I feel that you don't always see somebody who is as beautiful as her, but also self-deprecating." She was willing to laugh at herself and make fun of herself and be the butt of the joke, and still do it with grace and crack everyone up. Katie's little sister Caroline remembered her as someone that saw everything as an adventure. She was really sweet and outgoing, but also a little bossy. She liked to plan things and make her adventures go her way. She would say, "This is what we're doing. Let's go." In 2003, Katie was studying, part of a sorority, working as a waitress, and had been seeing her boyfriend Joe for 8 months. Things were busy, and she was enjoying the summer break before getting back into school. Sadly, Katie and Joe had hit a bit of a rocky patch. Katie was soon starting grad school and Joe was moving hours away to work in his family's business. They weren't too sure what their future was going to look like anymore. But it was Labor Day weekend, and they wanted to put everything aside and have a good time. Katie and Joe, along with Katie's roommate Tracy and some other friends, were bar hopping, drinking, dancing, and having a good time. As everywhere started to close, they all joined a local house party of between 30 and 40 people and carried on long into the morning. Security cameras at one of the bars had showed Katie and Joe holding hands and all seemingly appeared well. But at the house party, they got into a fight when Katie caught him kissing another woman. She and Joe had a drunken argument, witnessed by several people, and Katie left the house alone at 3 a.m. Joe and one of his friends later drove around in Katie's car looking for her. They went past Katie's house and saw the light wasn't on in her bedroom, so they didn't stop, assuming she was inside and probably asleep now. They drove back to the party and Joe drunkenly fell asleep on one of the chairs next to the other woman he'd been seen with. When the groggy group woke up, they noticed that Katie hadn't come back, but her car was still parked outside. Katie only lived a few blocks away from the house party, but she had left with nothing in the middle of a cold, dark night. Her phone was still in the house, along with her purse and keys, and everything else was still in her car. She had just walked out into the night empty-handed. Tracy, knowing the couple hadn't been in the best place lately, asked Joe if they had had a fight. Joe said no, and he didn't mention the other woman either. After calling around everyone she could think of that might have seen or heard from Katie, and not getting the response she was hoping for, Tracy asked Joe to be serious with her. Had they had a falling out? What had happened that had made her leave? Joe finally admitted to the drunken row but said that that was it. He thought she might be trying to teach him a lesson and was quite frustrated with her. Tracy hurried back to their house and went straight into her room. It was untouched. Tracy's mom had been staying there too and hadn't heard anything in the night. They called the hospitals with no luck and then called the police station, wondering if maybe she had been picked up for being intoxicated. Again, the answer was no. Had she crashed at someone's house that Tracy hadn't thought to call? Had she been hit by a car and was lying somewhere injured? A million thoughts were going through everyone's minds, and it was time to report her missing. 22-year-old graduate student Katie Sepich was walking home from a late Saturday night party. Tonight's investigators have made the case a top priority. We're interviewing witnesses, family, friends, anybody that may have seen her that night at the bars here in town. Almost 200 miles away, Katie's mom, Diane, had woken up that morning and felt something was wrong immediately. She couldn't put her finger on it. Call it mother's intuition. I had a very anxious feeling from the time I woke up that morning. Then at 2:15 that afternoon, the phone rang, and our lives were shattered with just 6 words. Have you talked to Katie today? The police were soon at the student's house, and walking around the back, they got their first clue. It seemed that Katie had just made it home. They found the window at the back of the property had a damaged screen, and one of her sandals was on the ground too. The gravel looked like it had been disturbed, almost like someone had been dragged, as they carried on looking at the house. A few hours earlier, another investigation had started. At 11 a.m., something had caught a couple SI who were out hunting near an old dump site east of Las Cruces, New Mexico. Tire tracks nearby indicated that a slightly bigger vehicle, like a pickup truck, had dumped her body there. Just a few hours later, everything would be connected when 22-year-old Katie was reported missing. It was such a vast area of desert, it was lucky they just happened to be there at that time. The heat plus the animals out there meant there was a very real possibility that her body might either have not been found or could have decomposed so much that no one could determine a cause of death. The police asked Tracy if she could come and identify someone possibly in relation to Katie's missing persons case. And enthusiastically, she said yes, of course, thinking that her friend had maybe wandered into a police station or a hospital without her ID and needed someone to pick her up. It was just some sort of protocol, she assumed. She had no idea what she was about to walk into. As they pulled the top of the body bag to the side, Tracy could not believe her eyes. She said she looked like she had died in pain. It was not the face of the happy friend she knew. The autopsy confirmed that Katie had been raped and strangled. She had had liquid poured on her back and shoulders and had been partially burned before the fire went out by itself. She had bloody DNA under her fingernails, and it was clear it had been a violent fight for her life until the end. No signs of a struggle were found in the particular area she was, so she must have been killed elsewhere, possibly close to her house or just outside. Her watch and the 2 rings she had been wearing appeared to have been taken by her killer as well. Her parents said she had a very husky voice, and she couldn't scream. It had been the same her whole life. Even as a child, if she tried to scream, it would just turn into a faint, breathy sound. Nothing would come out. This fact really haunted people. The idea that she couldn't scream or call for help despite trying so much. The DNA was uploaded to CODIS, but unfortunately there were no hits, which for such a horrific crime and set of injuries was somewhat unexpected. They were hoping for something to have flagged with a previous offender. They went back to the house party and started talking to those closest to her, including her roommate Tracy and boyfriend Joe. Joe held back on telling the detectives about the fight they had had and said even though they had not been in the best place, and moving away from each other would have proven hard, he wanted them to get married and start a family one day. They had even been looking at rings, and Joe bought one with her birthstone in it. He didn't label it, but it was almost like a promise ring, a sign of their future together. You know you're here. You know it's not good. Okay. Yes, sir. Girlfriend Katie's passed away. Okay, you're married. Thanks for cleaning it up. However, eyebrows were raised when Joe not only admitted that they had fought that morning and that he had drunkenly kissed another woman at the party, but he was the only person out of nearly 40 at the house party that did not consent to giving a DNA sample. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about what happened. Just last night she got mad at me. Came home from the bar. She got mad at me because I was kind of pulling her off. My roommate's sister. She walked in, and then she left. That's the last time I saw her. I drove by her house. Her light wasn't on, so I didn't stop. I was really drunk. I really didn't care. It's kind of like that. I don't care about her relationship very much. Not really as faithful as I should be. He denied having anything to do with what had happened to Katie. The pair of them were arguing, and everything had gone wrong that night. But a killer? No way, he said. Did you kill her? No, sir. How did it happen? What, sir? Her death. I don't know, sir. I know nothing about it. Sir, I know nothing about it. Feels so bad. Katie was everything to me. She was everything to you. Why were you going around on her? I don't know, sir. I get drunk. I'm stupid, you know. He'd made several calls to Katie's phone that morning, but people at the party said he was actually in possession of her phone at the time he was calling it, as well as her purse and keys. So why bother calling her? Was he trying to alibi himself? Within days of Katie's murder, Joe actually left to go back to his family's home 300 miles away. Investigators asked him to come back for a second interview, but he told them that this wouldn't be possible. His parents retained an attorney for him, who was, as expected, advising him to keep quiet. At this point, police really were only looking at him. His actions were just too odd and had been since the start. This was the person he tearfully told detectives he wanted to marry and couldn't live without. But to everyone else, it looked like he was completely cutting himself off from the investigation, no cooperating, and avoiding really simple questions. His lawyer said he didn't like the way the investigation had been handled, and he took a step back. At this point, unless they had probable cause, There was nothing they could do to force him to come back, take an interview, or provide that DNA sample. Katie's family were blindsided. Their experiences with Joe had always been positive, seemed to think the world of Katie. Initially, her parents had thought since the beginning that it was a stranger that had done this. A random attack, not anyone she knew, and definitely not Joe. Tracy thought the same. There were over 1,000 people at Katie's funeral. They had to set up speakers outside, so those who couldn't get into the church could still hear. But the only person not there was Joe. After learning that people were expressing their disdain at the idea of him going, Joe opted to stay all those miles away. For Katie's family, it was even more confusion and emotion. They just couldn't work him out. With so many vehicles parked up at the church, the investigation carried on outside. Tires were being checked, and they were hoping for a match to the tracks near her body. But nothing seemed to fit. Detectives even hid a camera by her grave to try and catch Joe saying something if he were to visit her. But again, nothing. A reward of $50,000 for information was on the table, and soon it would double. However, the investigation took a swift turn when detectives eventually got Joe's DNA from Katie's bedroom, which totally exonerated him. After Joe found this out, he spoke with detectives and finally agreed to give a sample. He said he didn't want to earlier because the pair had recently slept together, and he was afraid he would be charged with something if his DNA was there. Finally, after all of this, Joe was no longer a suspect, and the police could move on, but they had lost a lot of time. One detective, Mark Myers, said, "I'd be hard-pressed to not want to punch him in the throat. The way Joe could have just done what he needed to for Katie's family and didn't. His changing stories, the lack of cooperation, there was really no need for any of it." Dave agreed and said so much time had been wasted looking at him, when it all could have been avoided. Investigators then caught what they thought was a new break, and it would take them 1,500 miles away. After an argument between her and her boyfriend, she had left a bar and walked out into the night. The woman crawled to a house, and the owner called 911 for her. You can smell the burn. Incredibly, she survived the ordeal and was able to recall enough details about her attackers to put some sketches together. The cases were so similar that it had to be questioned. Even all those miles away, was there a link? Police really had nothing to go on where they were, so anything and everything had to be looked at. As soon as the sketches were released, a manager of a dairy farm recognized the drawings. It was two of his employees, 27-year-old Gregorio Morales and 23-year-old Juan Nito. The pair had quickly left town after the attack, but Gregorio had recently returned and was back working. The manager made a plan with the officers to help get Gregorio's DNA, and after he gave him a drink, he kept the bottle and gave it to the police. Several months later, his DNA was matched to the Green Bay victim. He was convicted of 2 counts of sexual assault, kidnapping, and first-degree reckless injury, and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Juan Nito, who is believed to have poured the liquid on the woman before she was burned, was also arrested, and he accepted a plea deal, which saw him sentenced to 70 years in prison. But as similar as the crimes had been, neither Gregorio nor Juan's DNA was matched to Katie. Detectives said it wasn't back to square one, it was square zero. Everyone was so frustrated that they couldn't solve this. Time was passing, and it was now more than 2 years since Katie was found, and this is where we go backwards a bit to move forward in her case. 9 weeks after Katie's murder, a man armed with a knife broke into the apartment of 2 New Mexico State students. They had both seen this man watching them before, lurking outside their building, peering in their windows, but now he was inside. And if police hadn't got there just in time, who knows what could have happened. Fortunately, they did, and officers arrested the 23-year-old man. His name was Gabriel Avila. The judge let him out on bail to, quote, get his affairs in order, and he was released. Finally, he was caught after trying to re-enter the United States, and a year later he was convicted of aggravated burglary with the intent to commit aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Now in prison, Gabriel had to submit a DNA sample, and detectives could not believe it when all this time later, they got a match to Katie's crime scene. Gabriel's name was totally unknown to authorities in Las Cruces. No one in Katie's circle had heard of him before either. Little did she know it was Katie's. Even though the tires had been swapped out, they found the originals, and this was all just another match to Katie's crime scene. Before anything went to trial, however, Gabriel confessed. He said he nearly hit her with his truck that morning after leaving his dealer's house to buy cocaine. He pulled over and offered her a ride home, which she refused. She was only a couple of blocks away. He said she looked pretty drunk, but she said she was fine. Gabriel set off, but then drove past her again a few minutes later and watched as she stood outside trying to get in via her window. He asked her again if she was okay, and she said, "I just can't get into my house. I don't have my purse." He drove and dumped her body, trying to burn any evidence as well. Detective Mark Myers said the chances of Gabriel seeing Katie that night were slim to none. If she would have left 30 seconds earlier, or even a minute earlier or later, he would have never seen her, he said. "Today we are rejoicing that it looks like we have the person who killed our daughter. We're so incredibly grateful for all of the hard work." The day after Christmas, Gabriel Avila was charged with murder and kidnapping. It would have been Katie's 26th birthday. The DA, Susana Martinez, said she was not prepared to drop any charges, and there was no bartering for a plea bargain either. So in May 2007, Gabriel Avila pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, rape, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. He asked to apologize to the Sepich family and said he didn't know why he had done it. Dave said he did see and hear remorse from him, which in a way was something, but it changed nothing. Jean said she had forgiven him because she wanted him to have salvation. He was sentenced to 69 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years of his sentence, but it seems very unlikely this will be successful. Given the violent nature of his crimes, that's how many cold cases one New Mexico police department has reopened just this year. Officers say the success of Katie's Law has a lot to do with it. When Katie was found at the time in New Mexico, and nearly every other state, it was illegal to take DNA when someone was arrested. DNA was only entered into the system if someone was convicted and sent to prison. Jean said, "I began doing research. I learned that almost every state took DNA upon a felony conviction, but at that time, only 5 had laws allowing DNA to be taken upon felony arrest. I dug deeper. I soon discovered that I was not interested in seeing DNA taken upon arrest merely to solve my daughter's murder. I was determined to see this happen because this simple act could literally save thousands of lives." She read about a man named Chester Dwayne Turner, who was arrested in California for assault with a deadly weapon, but there was not enough evidence to convict him, and thus his DNA was not taken. He was then arrested a total of 21 times before his DNA was taken. It was then they realized his DNA matched crime scene evidence found on 12 rape and murder victims. Things had to change. You might remember the name Katie Sepich. Her name is back in the headlines. On Friday, the Senate passed Katie's Law, a bill that would help states set up DNA databases for people arrested for felonies. Victory tonight for one New Mexico family trying to make sure their daughter's murder resulted in meaningful action. President Obama has just signed a nationwide version of Katie's Law. New Mexico has already had Katie's Law on the books since 2007. It's named for former NMSU student Katie Sepich. A bill to expand the state's Katie's Law is also moving forward at the Roundhouse. It's a bittersweet week for the family of Katie Sepich. The day after Christmas was Katie's birthday. Katie's Law went into effect in New Mexico in 2006, and this was a massive turning point. This law requires anyone arrested for a violent crime to submit a DNA sample. When Gabriel attacked Tonella and Leslie less than 3 months after Katie's murder, had Katie's Law been in effect, Gabriel would have been required to submit a sample. Jean recognized that it wouldn't have saved her daughter, but it would have meant she was off the streets so much quicker. 31 states have now passed Katie's Law or use a similar program. And in 2011, Katie's Law was expanded to include all felony arrests. Jean also started DNA Saves, a nonprofit that aims to educate lawmakers and the public about the power of DNA testing. Her family, who have now been campaigning and fighting for 2 decades, said they will never know the people who were helped by Katie's Law, but they know they are there, and that really keeps them going. They believe Katie's Law will result in thousands of all crimes being solved, prevent other innocent lives from being lost, and will keep innocent people from being prosecuted for crimes they did not commit. Our camera was rolling this afternoon as Albuquerque police took in a suspect in the rape of an elderly woman. 27-year-old Francisco Perez is accused of attacking the 76-year-old victim at Alamosa Elementary School. Tonight, Albuquerque police are crediting a state DNA collection law known as KDS Law for helping them find Perez. They're decade-old rape and murder cases that have haunted the state for years, like the killing of Susan Laporte and the strangling of Maria Padilla, both in 1985. But now, the Santa Fe Police Department is reopening hundreds of those cold cases, 318 to be exact. In July, police sent thousands of pieces of hair, blood, and clothing samples to the state crime lab to try and finally crack some of those cases. Dobbin says the big push to solve the cold cases is the success of Katie's Law. She was like a mom and a sister in one. And even though she didn't always want to share the spotlight, when it came to having his back, she never hesitated. No one messed with him. You really just do, and know how to keep moving forward, and there's no sight from anything beyond the next minute, the next breath. Katie was a lot to handle, but also a lot to have behind you and on your side. Caroline, who was just 9 when she lost her sister, said, "My visual memories of my life right after my sister died are really crisp and clear, but they're not vibrant." Jayan has had to change her outlook and mindset, and said it's so easy to fall into a cycle of saying if and maybe, and thinking about all the things that could have, should have, might have been. But since she lost her daughter, she said she's learned to not use the word if anymore.